10,000 words that was integrated into our language, and that meant it was readable. We were in what you might call Middle English then. Well, that's just an aside. So let's get on with what starts upsetting them, because I'll be coming back to language, which is a very important issue in our country. The Battle of Agincourt was an enormous battle. We had 100 years war with the French. That was from 1337 to 1453, which is 116 years, by the way. And during that time, Agincourt, where the British were absolutely successful. What year was Agincourt, Colin? Anybody? Alan, you were a good lad. You always never let me down. 1415. And we nearly took over all of France. And in fact, had Henry V not died a few years later, he would have called the King of France and the King of England. You can tell just how much influence we had. But a lady comes along after Agincourt, who rescued France, and what was she called? Elizabeth. Joan of Arc. 20 years old, and she managed to get the troops to re-engage with the English. And the big battle of Orleans is where they were successful, and they knocked us out. One up for the French. All that was left was Calais. And we had Calais until 1558. Anyhow, that was followed later by, in 1492, a significant event take place where Christopher Columbus came, he wanted to be sponsored. So he came to England in 1492. Any idea who was our king in 1492?
Henry V.
Any improvements in that?
Sixth.
Who? Henry VII.
Oh, there's only two out.
You got it right first then.
And we said, no, we're not sponsoring you. So he goes to Charles VIII in France. No. So where does he go to then?
Portugal.
No, Spain. Isabella, Queen Isabella, who was in cahoots with Portugal. So when Christopher Columbus goes over, remember, he's not got to North America, he's got to more South America and the Bahamas and all that stuff. Henry VIII realised that maybe he should have sponsored it. Had he done it, the whole of South America could now be English and not Spanish. However, the Pope said, right, the whole of South America goes to Spain, Brazil, and anything to that side goes to Portugal. That's why, of course, it's Portuguese in Brazil, Portuguese in Portugal, and the rest of South America is Spanish. Well, that was 1492. So we now come to the next stage, where we're now talking about 1558 is when we lose Calais, which was a one-up for the French, of course. So we're now moving to the next century, 1620. Now in 1620 was a great year, well you might say for the British, not so much against the French, because the Pilgrims left from Plymouth. Any idea of the ship?
Mayflower.
Very good.
I come from Plymouth. The Mayflower steps.
In fact, there's a bottle of wine in my car up to now, so you were winning it. Now, the beauty about that, they landed at Newfoundland, and what then happened is English people started going out there with meant that slowly we're populating North America, which you'll see how important that was shortly. In 1704, I think we've all been to Blenheim Palace, have we?
Yeah.
No, the French hate Blenheim Palace. Why do you reckon they hate Blenheim Palace?
Because of, well, you've got Duke of, well, no, I'm trying to, what's he called?
I don't know.
Napoleon's conqueror.
Marlborough, Duke of Marlborough.
Duke of Marlborough, yeah. And of
Duke of
course, Winston
Marlborough.
Churchill lived there as well.
Winston Churchill.
Exactly. In 1704, we had to knock the French out. What they wanted to do, they wanted, with Spain, to rule Europe. Now, this country's always been very good at making sure that nothing like that happens. We were part of the Grand Alliance, and we were the leading country. So, Marlborough had to go out there and win a great, great battle. And as a result, who was the monarch at the time of 1704?
George.
No, you're doing your best.
Heredate.
Who
And what
are-
Queen Anne did, she bequeathed to the Duke of Marlborough all the land down there in Oxford, and allowed that building with Capability Brown to do the gardens. And that's why the French will never go to Blenheim Palace. Now, so obviously we're now coming where the French are getting to hate us more and more. Now, 1759, and I should have brought the book if I'd have gone home, which I didn't. That thick again. 1759 is seen as the best year that Britain ever had. Beat 1805, 1815, 1066, 1704. What did we do, Colin, in 1759? No, it wasn't. More till it was the next century. Come on, Alan.
Canada.
Well, yeah, yes, Alan, yes, you're on the right, yes. You're winning the line, Alan. In 1759, we knocked the French out of Canada, and we knocked the French out of what other big country?
America.
Did you not go to school, some of you chaps? India. So that was the time when all of a sudden Britain is
Ruled the
becoming the
waves.
master of the world.
The bugger we met at it.
Next thing that happens, because the French had spent so much time trying to beat the British, they were having trouble at all. Social unrest, economic unrest. So when was the French Revolution?
1796.
1789.
Very good, Kath. Now, you're in line. Now tell them, Kath, the month.
Say it again.
The month.
July.
Very good.
Bastille Day.
July the 14th.
Next week. This week.
Yeah.
And as a result of that, result of that, they lost great engineers, because most engineers, especially if they're in the Navy, had their heads chopped off. And one of them in particular was Isambard Brunel's father. Isambard Brunel. And he had to scarper to New York, then he came to England when he realised that he could put to use his inventions, block making, shoemaking, building the tunnel under the Thames. So that was 1789.
And we had all the Huguenots came over as well from France.
Yeah, exactly. So France, now one of the great strengths of France, our first census in 1801, any idea what the population of England and Wales was?
20 odd million.
9.4 million. Now what would you think the population of France was in 1801?
Well, they've always been very similar to us, but with 12 twice the land
They
area.
are now
They are now very similar.
27 million. they've always had that 3 times more. And that's why, of course, we've been wiped out by the French, apart from that little piece of water, just like, you know, we would with the Germans. So, so right, we've now come to 1805. My hero, Nelson. What was the, where's Franco gone? Franco? What was the, we all know it was 1805,
Yeah.
Trafalgar. What was the month?
October.
Very good. Now, you won't be able to tell me the day.
The day was the, was it the 21st? Oh,
Good job you remembered that, because I dropped that into you. The 21st of October, 1805. Who else were we fighting besides the French
18.
that day?
the Spanish.
Yeah, the Spanish.
Ah, right.
But we won the day. Not one ship of the British 27 ships was all seaworthy, and all the enemy 33 ships of the line either were sunk, disabled, or fled. What a great day. However, Napoleon, although he's lost at sea, was a great commander on land. And he, of course, controlled Europe between 1805 and 1815 until the British, invited by the Portuguese to come, because the Portugal wanted to do trade with us. Napoleon had said any country will be in trouble if you trade with Great Britain. Portugal needed to trade with us, so invited Britain, would we send out troops to in fact help them. And eventually, and who was our great man?
Sharp.
Who was our great man?
Sharp. That's where he started the program in Portugal.
Yeah. Wellington.
Wellington.
What a great, well he was until he became Prime Minister in 1815. Any idea of the date? Any month?
For
When the Battle of Waterloo was? Any idea of the month?
can't remember.
June 18th. So, another great battle. You can now understand, and the battle was at Waterloo. Now, what upset the French when we named the railway station Waterloo? You can imagine, that was a bit clumsy on our part, wasn't it? What's it now called?
No idea.
What's it called now, Alan? Waterloo Station.
Used to.
No.
Liverpool
Used to.
Street.
St Pancras. So that was 1815. So you can understand that it's all going our way. Now in 1884, another thing happened that upset the French. Now, because we were great sailors and controlled the seas from the Battle of Trafalgar, we were never challenged again. So we had to know where longitude was. And a guy, English guy, invented the apparatus for measuring longitude. He knew exactly. And funnily enough, 0 prime meridian runs straight through, where's the observer?
Greenwich.
Greenwich. In fact, if you go to Greenwich, there's a line.
I've got a
going
picture
down.
of June stood across it.
Yeah, you're either in east or west. Now, they met, so all the countries met to decide what they would call it. But because we already had an observatory at Greenwich, and no other country had, because, you know, they weren't great leaders in shipping, they said, right, we'll call it Greenwich Mean Time. Did the French like that? They said, oh no, we're not going to have that. We're going to call it Paris Mean Time. Paris meantime meant going through Paris wasn't 0, it was a few degrees out. But they wouldn't change it. But they have now managed to change it, thanks to their influence. They ate the word Greenwich, so now it's called 3 letters. I forgot what the letters are now, which means Greenwich means time, but it doesn't have Greenwich, just to please the French. The word Greenwich doesn't appear. So now we come to the Second World War, and now trouble really comes now. What are we going to do with the French who had, what was that great fortification called the French had?
The Maginot Line.
Yeah. And what did the Germans do? They went right round it and capitulated, leaving our poor lads stuck at Dunkirk.
All 345,000.
No. So, what did de Gaulle say to Churchill? He said, you've got to help us. We want you to give us, lend us some of your planes to attack the Germans. So what did Churchill say to that?
On your right,
So straight away, that's one that de Gaulle thinks I'll remember that one day. Worse then comes, because all their ships are based down at Algeria, are the French ships. So they're told, is France, you either hand your ships over to the British, or put them in a neutral port. They wouldn't do either. So Churchill gave them an ultimatum. If in 10 days you haven't made the decision, we'll blow them up. We didn't think we would, but we did. We blew all them ships up. And de Gaulle thinks, I'll get me home back one day. So the day comes when we want to join the common market. And what did de Gaulle say?
No.
And what did he say the second time?
No.
No, exactly. So you can well imagine why the French are not happy with us. Now we're going back to the main item, which is language. Because they see, and they're probably right, that theirs is a pure language, and ours is a bastard language. You know, we've got to accept it. But unfortunately, English now is now overtaking the Chinese, and French is in 7th place. And that's mainly because of the ship that left in 1620, the Mayflower, because there weren't anybody in America. When we had our first census in 1801, they had a census a year later. Right, Malcolm, what was the census in 1802 in America?
I haven't a clue.
Well, I'm sure you could give a good guess.
5 million.
No, I'm looking at 10.
10, would you? It was 4, just less than 4 million. And of that 4 million, 3/4 either came from Britain or were associated with Britain. So I don't know whether you know it, the official language of America is what?
English.
No, it has no official language, America. It's just accepted
Speaking.
because it was all English who were speaking it, that English to this day is the reason. And of course, we are fortunate. Had it not been for our lads and lasses in 1620, then it could well have been Germany who were not far behind. They're in 2nd place. So the reason we are fortunate, which every country, Germany and France, say that the British are lazy. They will not learn a second language. And they're right, aren't they?
Yeah.
They are right. Yeah, but it doesn't matter, Colin. We are lazy. We don't try. And I tried, and You know, we are lazy.
So
We can't,
just,
all we can say is a couple of words when we go to Spain, isn't it? I know, the trouble is, if you can say a few good words, they think you can speak Spanish, so they come back. I mean, the Spanish is like, I always think the two people arguing when the Spaniards are speaking to one another. So, we are very fortunate that our language is a bastard language, and the French is pure. Unfortunately, circumstances are such that English, and of course you can well imagine, when it came to deciding an air traffic control, which would be the official language, because remember, when the war finished, the only countries producing aeroplanes, and America, France wasn't, Germany wasn't, Japan wasn't, and no other country. So when we flew our first international aircraft, transatlantic, which was called, what was it called? The first liner in 1946 that flew to America.
BAC.
Yeah, it was the Comet.
Comet, yeah,
What
BAC.
were wrong with the Comet? Why did that eventually always sold to Dan Air? Remember
Down there.
Do you
Down
know
there.
why? Do you know why the Comet, great successful plane, why did it have so many crashes? The Comet,
Did it have an American engine?
the windows.
Oh, yeah,
They
yeah.
made
yeah,
the
yeah,
windows
yeah, yeah.
round, and they blew in. So there were only one or two, of course, but it's enough to give the reputation. And Dan Hur took those over. I'd flown in Dan Hur, I never knew that until I read all about it.
Yeah, but they bought a lot of sellotape to stick the window.
Yeah. So here we are now. So they had to decide, we've got to have signallers in the sky, air traffic control. So what language are they going to speak? English. Did the French like that? No. If a French pilot in a French plane is arriving at a French airport, we're speaking French. And that carried on until the year 2000, when the French authorities realised that they wanted to make de Gaulle Airport bigger than Heathrow. And they have the land, it's the only international airport in Europe that's got unlimited land to expand. So they said to the pilots, hey, we're in a bit of trouble here. We're going to have to speak English. The pilot said, what did the pilot say?
No.
Franco.
No,
you
Mr.
said
What did the
that,
pilot
you
say?
got up to- So there's a dilemma. They went on strike. So how did they resolve it? Any idea? Do they all speak English at every French airport? No, what the deal that was thrashed out was that if you land at de Gaulle Airport, you must speak English. If you land at Orly or the other smaller airports, the Bourget, that's another one, isn't it? You can speak French, and that's what they do to this very day. English at de Gaulle, French at the smaller ones. Well, I think you must agree that we have upset the French many, very many times. And now that